I always thought our life was a canvas of predictable beauty, painted with the steady strokes of routine. My name is Daniel Harper, a 42-year-old architect with a penchant for precision. My wife, Clara, 39, was the vibrant contrast to my measured lines. A florist whose hands danced with petals to create bouquets that seemed to whisper secrets. We lived in a modest but charming house in Portland, Oregon, with ivy climbing the brick walls and a garden that Clara tended like a sacred ritual. Our marriage, 12 years strong, felt like a structure I designed myself. Solid, balanced, enduring. But structures, I've learned, can hide cracks beneath their surfaces. It started with small things imperceptible at first. Clara's laughter, once a melody that filled our evenings, grew sparse. She'd linger at her shop, claiming orders demanded her time. But her eyes, those hazel pools I'd memorized, dodged mine when she spoke. I chalked it up to stress. Her business was thriving, after all, and I was buried in blueprints for a new community center, my biggest project yet. We were busy, I told myself. That's all. Then came the evening that nudged my instincts awake. I'd finished a late meeting and decided to surprise Clara at her shop, a cozy nook called Petal and Thorn. The lights were dim when I arrived. The sign flipped to closed. I knocked, expecting her to emerge from the back, arms dusted with pollen, smiling that tired but genuine smile. Instead, I saw movement, a shadow flitting behind the counter. Not Clara's familiar silhouette, but broader, angular. My heart thudded, not with suspicion yet, but with a vague unease. I called her phone. No answer. I texted, "At the shop. Where are you?" Minutes later, her reply, "Running errands. Be home soon." I waited in the car, the autumn chill seeping through the windows. Clara appeared 20 minutes later, alone, her scarf askew, cheeks flushed as if she'd been rushing. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" she said, her voice a pitch too high. I mentioned the shadow, half joking, expecting her to laugh it off. "Oh, probably just the delivery guy," she said, waving a hand. "He's always dropping off late." But her fingers fumbled with her keys, and she didn't meet my gaze. I drove us home, her chatter filling the silence, but it felt rehearsed, like lines from a play I hadn't been cast in. That night, as she slept, I lay awake, replaying the scene. The shadow hadn't moved like a delivery guy. It lingered, deliberate, intimate. I told myself I was paranoid. Clara was my anchor, the woman who'd cried with me when we lost our first dog, who'd danced barefoot in our kitchen to jazz records. Betrayal wasn't in her blueprint. Yet, the unease rooted itself, a weed in my orderly garden. I began noticing her phone, always face down now, buzzing at odd hours. She'd smile and dismiss it. Just a client. But clients don't text at midnight. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I'm an architect. I build things methodically. I needed evidence, not hunches. So I started watching subtly, I thought. I noted her schedule, the times she claimed to be at the shop versus when she actually left. I checked our bank statements, expecting nothing, but found charges at a cafe I'd never heard of, tucked in a part of town we rarely visited. Small clues, but they piled like bricks, forming a wall between my trust and her truth. Clara, my Clara, was slipping into a narrative I hadn't written, and I was determined to uncover its plot before it unraveled me completely. The next weeks were a study in restraint. I didn't want to believe Clara was hiding something, but doubt is a relentless draftsman, sketching lines where you'd rather see blank space. I kept my routine steady. Mornings at my drafting table, afternoons with clients, evenings pretending everything was fine. But pretense is exhausting, and I was burning through reserves I didn't know I had. Clara, meanwhile, seemed to bloom in her secrecy. Her smiles were brighter, her movements lighter, as if she'd shed a weight I hadn't realized she carried. It made me question my own perception. Was I inventing this rift? I decided to dig deeper, not out of malice but necessity. I needed clarity, like a blueprint to navigate this fog. One afternoon, while Clara was supposedly at a floral convention, I visited Petal and Thorn. The shop was open, manned by her assistant, Lily. a cheerful 20-something who adored Clara. "She's not here," Lily said, puzzled. "She said she'd be back tomorrow." My stomach churned. The convention was a day trip, not overnight. I smiled, thanked Lily, and left before my face betrayed me. That evening, I checked Clara's laptop, something I'd never done before. Felt like trespassing, but I was desperate for answers. Her password was still our old dog's name, a detail that stung with its familiarity. I found emails, innocuous at first, but one thread caught my eye, buried in a folder labeled Miscellaneous. Messages from someone named Evan, brief but suggestive. "Missed you at the cafe. Can't wait for Thursday." No last name, no context, but the tone was intimate, unguarded. My pulse quickened. I searched the name online, cross-referencing local businesses, social media, anything. Nothing definitive, but the cafe charges on our statements aligned with the dates in Evan's emails. I didn't stop there. Guilt gnawed at me, but suspicion was louder. I installed a tracking app on our shared cloud account, one Clara wouldn't notice. It showed her phone's location. Not at the convention center, but a hotel downtown. I drove there, heart hammering, telling myself I'd find her at a networking event, laughing with colleagues. The lobby was sleek, all glass and soft lighting, but Clara wasn't there. I lingered, unsure what I was even looking for, until I saw her, Clara, stepping out of the elevator, her arm brushing against a man's. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that belonged in a cologne ad. They didn't touch overtly, but their ease screamed familiarity. I ducked behind a pillar, my architect's mind cataloging details. His tailored coat, her loosened scarf, the way she leaned into his laugh. They parted at the entrance, him to a cab, her to our car. I followed her home, tailing her like a stranger, my hands gripping the wheel. She didn't notice me. At home, she greeted me with a kiss, her lips warm, her scent faintly different. Not her usual rosewater, but something muskier, foreign. "How was the convention?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Exhausting," she said, "but inspiring." She rambled about workshops, her eyes darting to her phone when it buzzed. I nodded, playing the part of the trusting husband, but my mind was a construction site assembling a plan. I needed to know who Evan was, what he meant to her, and why she'd chosen this path. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was analytical, piecing together a puzzle I hadn't asked for. That night, I lay beside her, her breathing soft and even, and I wondered how someone so close could feel so far. The man in the hotel wasn't a shadow anymore. He had a name, a presence. And I, Daniel Harper, the man who built things, was about to dismantle whatever this was, brick by careful brick, until I understood its foundation. Obsession is a quiet architect, drafting plans while you sleep. I couldn't unsee Clara with that man. Evan, I presumed, nor could I mute the questions hammering my skull. Who was he? How long had this been happening? And why, after 12 years, had Clara chosen to redraw our life without me? I didn't confront her. Confrontation is a wrecking ball. I needed precision, like a surveyor mapping uncharted land. So, I built my case layer by layer, each discovery a beam in the structure of my resolve. I started with Evan. The emails were my only lead, so I traced the cafe mentioned in them, a place called the Gilded Brew, tucked in a trendy corner of Portland. I visited on a Wednesday, Clara's supposed late shop night. The cafe was intimate, with exposed brick walls and mismatched chairs, the kind of place Clara loved. I ordered a coffee, scanning the room. No Clara, no Evan, but the barista, a lanky guy with a nose ring, seemed chatty. I mentioned I was looking for a friend. Evan, maybe comes here with a woman named Clara? Casual, I thought. The barista nodded. "Oh yeah, the flower lady and her buddy. They're regulars. Usually Thursdays." My chest tightened, but I smiled, thanked him, and left. Thursday, I was back, positioned in a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. Clara walked in at 6:17 p.m., her scarf loose, her smile unguarded. Behind her was the man from the hotel, Evan. He was older than I'd guessed. mid-40s maybe, with streaks of gray in his dark hair and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. They sat near the window, their knees brushing under the table. I watched, invisible behind my newspaper, as they leaned close, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup, his hand grazing hers. It wasn't overt. No kisses, no grand gestures. But it was intimate, a choreography of two people who knew each other's rhythms. I snapped photos with my phone, discreetly, my architect's eye framing each shot like evidence for a tribunal. Clara laughed at something he said, her head tilting the way it used to when we'd stay up late dreaming about our future. I felt like an intruder in my own marriage, cataloging moments that weren't mine. They left after an hour, parting with a hug that lingered too long. I followed Evan this time, keeping my distance. He drove to a sleek office building downtown, the kind that housed lawyers or consultants. The sign read Harrington and Associates. A quick search later, I had a name. Evan Harrington, financial advisor, married, 2 kids. Real people, indeed. Back home, Clara was humming in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup like nothing had changed. "Good day," I asked, my voice a practiced calm. "Great," she said. "Got a big order done." I nodded, swallowing the urge to demand the truth. Instead, I kept building my blueprint. I cross-referenced Evan's firm with Clara's business, finding invoices for consulting services I'd never questioned. Thousands of dollars, funneled quietly, masked as legitimate expenses. Had she been paying him, or was it a cover for something else? I dug into Evan's life next. Social media painted him as a family man. Photos of him with his wife, Laura, at charity galas, his kids at soccer games. But there were gaps, absences where a man like him should have been visible. Late-night posts from Laura about working alone again. I wondered if she sensed what I did, if she was building her own case across town. The thought didn't comfort me. It just made the world feel smaller, meaner. That night, Clara curled against me in bed, her warmth a cruel reminder of what I was losing. I didn't sleep. I was sketching a new design, not a building but a reckoning. Evan wasn't a shadow anymore, he was a target. And Clara, my Clara, was the center of a structure I needed to understand before I could decide what to dismantle. Revenge wasn't my goal yet, but it was a spark, waiting for kindling. Knowledge is a heavy material, denser than steel, and I was carrying more of it each day. Clara's betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It had a face, a name, a schedule. Evan Harrington wasn't just a man she met for coffee. He was a fixture, woven into her life like ivy through a trellis. I couldn't stop seeing them together, their casual touches replaying in my mind like a film I couldn't pause. Yet I still loved her. That was the worst part, the way my heart clung to the Clara I knew, even as evidence piled against her. I needed more than snapshots and hunches. I needed to hear it, to know the texture of their connection. So I crossed a line I'd never imagined breaching. I bought a small audio recorder, the kind architects use for site notes, and hid it in Clara's shop, tucked behind a shelf of vases. It felt like sabotage, planting a device in the heart of her sanctuary, but I justified it. Truth was my foundation now, and I'd excavate it however I must. The recorder ran for 2 days before I retrieved it, late at night when Clara was asleep. I listened in my car, parked a block from our house, the darkness amplifying every sound. Most of it was mundane, customers, Lily's chatter, Clara's humming. But then, a conversation time-stamped Thursday afternoon. Evan's voice, low and warm. "You're glowing today." Clara's laugh, soft, intimate. "You always say that." They talked about a trip, not hypothetical but planned. A weekend in Seattle. "Just us," Clara said. Evan murmured something about a hotel with a view. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, their voices carving into me. She hadn't mentioned Seattle to me. Not a word. I didn't stop there. I tracked their movements, syncing the recorder's data with the tracking app. They met at the shop, the cafe, occasionally a park. Never hotels, not yet, but the intent was clear. Clara was meticulous, covering her tracks with half-truths about deliveries or client meetings. She'd built a parallel life, and I was the ghost haunting its edges. I wondered what she told Evan about me. Did she paint me as neglectful, distant? Or was I just absent from their story? An irrelevant detail? I started studying Evan's wife, Laura, too. She was a realtor, polished and poised, her online presence meticulous. I found her blog, where she wrote about balancing career and family, her tone upbeat but strained. One post, buried months back, mentioned trusting through tough times. It wasn't proof, but it was a crack, a hint she might suspect something. I considered reaching out, but what would I say? Your husband's stealing my wife? Felt too raw, too exposing. Instead, I kept my focus on Clara, on understanding why she'd chosen this. At home, I played the doting husband, cooking dinners, asking about her day. Clara seemed grateful, but her warmth was a veneer, thin enough to crack if I pressed too hard. I didn't. I was still building, still measuring. One night, she mentioned a new client, a big deal that might take her out of town. Seattle, I asked, testing. Her pause was brief, but I caught it. No, Salem, she said, smiling. The lie landed like a brick, solidifying my resolve. I wasn't ready to confront her, not without a plan. Revenge was forming, though not a vague impulse, but a design. I imagined exposing them, not just to each other's spouses, but to their worlds. Evan's clients, Clara's customers, the community they both charmed. I wanted their facades to crumble, their lies to collapse like poorly built walls. But I needed precision, timing. I was an architect after all, and destruction, like creation, demanded care. For now, I watched, waited, and let the weight of knowing sharpen my edges, preparing me for what was coming. By now, I was living two lives. The husband Clara saw, steady and unassuming, and the man I'd become, a silent investigator carving truth from deception. The audio recorder, the tracking app, the photos, they weren't just tools. They were my scaffolding, holding me up as I navigated this betrayal. Clara's affair with Evan wasn't a fling. It was a structure they'd built together, deliberate and intricate. I couldn't ignore its foundations, but I could study them, learn their weaknesses, and plan their undoing. I started mapping their world more deeply. Evan's firm, Harrington and Associates, was a goldmine of context. I posed as a potential client, scheduling a consultation under a false name. His office was all glass and mahogany, a temple to wealth and control. Evan greeted me with a handshake, his smile practiced, his eyes scanning me like I was a ledger. We talked investments, but I was studying him, his gestures, his cadence, the way he leaned forward when he thought he'd hooked me. I saw what Clara might see. Charisma, certainty, a man who promised escape. But I also saw cracks. His phone buzzed constantly, and he glanced at it with a flicker of tension. Was it Clara? His wife? Someone else? I left with a brochure and a clearer picture. Evan wasn't just a financial advisor. He was a performer, balancing multiple stages. I wondered how many others he'd drawn into his orbit, how many lives he'd tangled. Back home, I cross-checked his firm's clients against Clara's invoices. One name stood out. A shell company linked to consulting payments. Public records showed Evan as a partial owner. Clara wasn't just meeting him. She was funneling money, blending their affair into her business. It was clever, almost admirable, if it didn't gut me. I turned to Laura next, not contacting her but observing. I attended an open house she hosted, blending in with prospective buyers. She was warm, professional, but her eyes carried a quiet fatigue, like someone holding too many threads together. I overheard her mention Evan to a colleague, always working late. I felt a pang of kinship, but I didn't approach her. Not yet. She was a piece of the puzzle, not the solution. My focus stayed on Clara, on dismantling the life she'd built with Evan without shattering my own. At home, Clara's lies grew bolder. She mentioned another client trip, this time to Seattle, confirming what I'd heard on the recorder. I nodded, asked about her plans, my voice a perfect mask. Inside, I was sketching retribution, not impulsive but surgical. I imagined exposing them publicly, maybe a presentation at Evan's firm, slides of their cafe meetings projected for his colleagues, or a floral arrangement sent to Laura, petals spelling out the truth. Cruel, yes, but they'd earned it. I wasn't there yet. I needed more. I planted a second recorder, this time in Clara's car. A riskier move but necessary. It captured fragments. Her humming, a call with Evan, their voices soft, planning their weekend. Daniel suspects nothing, she said once, and I froze, hearing my name in her betrayal. It wasn't just infidelity. It was dismissal, as if I were a blueprint she'd discarded. That moment crystallized my intent. Revenge wouldn't just expose them. It would reclaim me, rebuild the man I'd been before this shadow fell. I started drafting the first phase, gathering undeniable proof. I hired a private investigator, a discreet professional named Marla, to tail them in Seattle. I didn't want emotion clouding my work. She'd be my detached lens. Meanwhile, I kept my routine, kissing Clara goodnight, my lips brushing a stranger's skin. The structure of our marriage was still standing, but I was its architect no longer. I was its demolisher, plotting a collapse so precise it would leave only truth in its wake. The spark of revenge was now aflame, and I was ready to let it burn, carefully, until it consumed their world. Patience is an architect's virtue, but it's also a torment. Waiting for Marla, the private investigator, to return from Seattle felt like drafting a skyscraper one line at a time. I went through the motions at home, blueprints for the community center, dinners with Clara, her smiles now a foreign language. She left for her client trip on a Friday, her suitcase packed with care, her goodbye kiss a fleeting brush against my cheek. I nodded, wished her luck, and watched her drive away, the recorder in her car already humming, capturing secrets I'd soon dissect. Marla's first report came Sunday night, emailed in crisp, clinical prose. Clara and Evan had checked into a boutique hotel, the Azure Loft, under his name. Marla included photos. Clara laughing in a hotel bar, Evan's hand on her lower back. The two of them strolling Pike Place Market, her arm looped through his. The images were sharp, undeniable. Each one a nail in the coffin of my denial. Marla's notes detailed their routine. Breakfasts in bed, late-night walks, moments of intimacy stolen in public view. They weren't hiding, not really. Their arrogance stunned me. I listened to the car recorder next, alone in my office, the house silent without Clara's presence. Her voice was bright, unguarded, talking to Evan on speakerphone as she drove. "It's perfect," she said, describing their weekend. "No one knows us here." Evan's chuckle was smug. "Just wait till I show you the view." My hands clenched, not in rage but resolve. They'd built a fantasy, but fantasies are fragile, and I was learning their seams. The recorder caught Clara's sigh later, alone, muttering, "I wish it could always be like this." That hurt more than the photos. The longing in her voice, as if our life, our home, was a cage. I met Marla Monday, in a diner far from our neighborhood. She was all business, gray hair pulled tight, her notepad a map of Clara's betrayal. "They're careful," she said, "but not invisible. Evan's got a reputation, likes attention, likes control. Clara's different. She's in deep emotionally." I nodded, absorbing her words like a site survey. Marla handed me a USB drive. More photos, receipts, even a hotel keycard they'd discarded. "Enough to bury them," she said. I thanked her, paid her fee, and left, the drive heavy in my pocket. At home, Clara returned, glowing, her stories about Salem clients polished but hollow. I played along, asking details, watching her weave lies with the ease of a master florist arranging blooms. She didn't suspect me, didn't see the structure I was building. That night, I cataloged Marla's evidence, organizing it like a project timeline. Photos, audio, financial trails, the invoices tying Clara's shop to Evan's shell company. It was a lattice of deceit, intricate but vulnerable. I could expose them now, but exposure alone wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices, to see their world shift beneath them. I started thinking beyond confrontation, toward something architectural, a design that would reshape their reality. Revenge wasn't just about truth. It was about impact, resonance. I imagined Clara's shop, her pride, turned against her. Evan's polished career, his family, unraveling in public view. But I needed more than evidence. I needed leverage, a way to ensure they couldn't rebuild. So, I kept waiting, refining my plan. Each day a new line in the blueprint of their downfall. Clara slept beside me, oblivious, her breath a rhythm I no longer trusted. Patience, I told myself, would be my foundation, and when the moment came, it would hold firm. Normalcy is a facade, a veneer stretched over chaos. I wore it daily now, pouring coffee for Clara, discussing her shop's spring orders, laughing at her stories as if they weren't laced with deceit. She seemed content, maybe even relieved, as if my calm reassured her that her secret was safe. But secrets are like bad welds, hidden until stress reveals them. I was that stress, biding my time, my architect's mind sketching a reckoning while my heart wrestled with what I'd lost. I turned my focus to Evan's life, probing deeper into his world. His firm's website listed client testimonials, all glowing, but I dug into public records, finding complaints buried in regulatory filings. Small things like mismanaged accounts, nothing catastrophic. Yet, I wondered if I could amplify those cracks, make his professional facade as brittle as my marriage. I also found Laura's real estate listings, her sales steady but her social media quieter lately, as if she sensed a storm. I didn't contact her. She wasn't my ally yet, but I noted her as a variable, a potential force in my design. Clara's shop became my next site. I visited under the guise of bringing lunch, watching her interact with Lily, her customers, the space itself. Petal and thorn was her soul made physical. Vines curling around shelves, vases glinting in sunlight. But it was also her vulnerability. The invoices I'd found suggested she'd used shop funds to mask payments to Evan's company, a financial tangle that could unravel her business if exposed. I didn't want to destroy her outright. Not yet, but I needed her to feel the stakes of her choices. I installed a second recorder in the shop, this time in a ceiling vent, harder to detect. It captured more than the first. Evan visiting after hours, their voices low, planning another trip. Laura's asking questions, he said once, tension in his tone. Clara's reply was sharp. Handle it. I'm handling Daniel. Hearing my name again, so casually dismissed, was a blade. But it clarified my purpose. They weren't just betraying me. They were managing me like a project they'd outsourced. That arrogance would be their ruin. I started laying groundwork for exposure, subtle but deliberate. I created an anonymous email account and drafted a tip to a local business journal, hinting at financial irregularities at Harrington and Associates. I didn't send it, not yet, but it felt good to have it ready, a lever I could pull when the time came. I also began sketching a public display for Clara, something tied to her shop. Maybe a charity event, where her invoices, her lies, would bloom for all to see. The thought was cruel, yes, but it matched the cruelty of her deception. At home, Clara noticed my distance, though I hid it well. "You okay?" she asked one night, her hand on mine. I wanted to scream, to demand why she'd chosen Evan, why I wasn't enough. Instead, I smiled. "Just work," I said. She bought it, or pretended to, and we moved on, two actors in a play nearing its final act. I wasn't ready to drop the curtain, though. My plan needed scale, impact, a structure that would stand long after their affair collapsed. That night, I dreamed of a building, its walls glass, every secret visible. I woke with a clearer vision. Revenge wasn't just about them. It was about me, reclaiming my agency, my worth. I'd been a footnote in their story, but I'd rewrite the ending. I pulled Marla's USB drive from my desk, reviewing the photos again, each one fuel for the fire I was stoking. Clara and Evan thought they'd built something unbreakable, but I was the architect now, and their foundation was about to crack under the weight of my patience. Every structure has a purpose, a reason for its shape. I needed to understand Clara's, not just what she was doing, but why. Why Evan? Why now? I'd collected evidence like a hoarder, but motives were the rebar holding her betrayal together. Without them, my revenge would be hollow, a facade without function. So, I dug into her past, our past, searching for the moment she'd turned away from me. I started with her journals, old leather-bound books she kept in a box under our bed. She hadn't written in years, or so I thought, but I found a new one, tucked behind photo albums. Reading it felt like breaking a seal, but I was beyond guilt. The entries were sporadic, starting a year ago. She wrote about her shop's success, but also a restlessness, a sense of being stuck. One page mentioned me. "Daniel's so steady, but I need more." More what? I wasn't a dreamer like her, but I'd built a life she'd seemed to love. Hadn't I? Evan appeared later. Unnamed at first. Just him. "He sees me, really sees me," she wrote. "It's like waking up." My stomach twisted. Not just at her words, but at my failure to notice her drift. I'd been drafting buildings while she was drafting a new self, one I didn't fit into. The journal didn't excuse her. It enraged me, but it gave context. She wasn't just chasing thrill. She was chasing a version of herself I'd stopped seeing. I cross-referenced her entries with Evan's life, looking for their spark. His firm had consulted for a floral trade group Clara joined 2 years ago. That's where it started, I guessed. Small talk at a conference, his charm filling gaps I didn't know existed. I found a photo from that event online. Clara and Evan in a group shot, her smile shy, his gaze already proprietary. It wasn't proof, but it was a cornerstone, the moment their paths converged. I watched Clara more closely now, not just for lies but for clues to her state of mind. She was vibrant when she talked about her shop, but her eyes dimmed at home, as if our life was a sketch she'd outgrown. I tested her, subtly mentioning a vacation, just us, to see her reaction. "Sounds nice," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Evan was her escape, I realized, not just from me but from the weight of routine. Understanding that didn't soften me. It sharpened my focus. She'd chosen to rebuild herself with him, not me, and that choice had consequences. I contacted Marla again, asking her to dig into Evan's history, not just his marriage but his habits, his weaknesses. She found rumors of prior affairs, hushed up, clients charmed into silence. He was a predator of opportunity, thriving on women like Clara who craved validation. That knowledge was a tool, a way to expose him not just to Laura but to his world. I also asked Marla to check Clara's shop finances deeper, confirming the shell company payments. The numbers were damning, nearly $20,000 funneled over a year. It wasn't just emotional. It was structural, a betrayal woven into her business. At home, I kept my facade, but cracks showed. Clara caught me staring once, my face unguarded. "What's wrong?" she asked, concern flickering. I wanted to laugh. "What's wrong?" But I shrugged, said I was tired. She let it go, but I saw her watching me later, as if sensing a shift. Good. Let her wonder. My revenge was taking shape, not a blunt strike but a calculated erosion. I'd exposed their affair, yes, but also their motives. Clara's restlessness, Evan's opportunism, until their worlds reflected the chaos they'd sown. I was no longer just Daniel, the betrayed husband. I was the architect of their consequences, and my design was nearly complete. Structures fail when their supports give way, and lies are the weakest beams. Clara and Evan's affair rested on deception, not just to me and Laura, but to themselves, their belief they could balance two worlds without collapse. I saw it clearly now, their overconfidence a flaw I could exploit. My revenge wasn't about shouting their secrets. It was about removing their supports, letting their own weight bring them down. But first, I needed to test their foundation to see how much pressure it could bear. I started with Evan indirectly. Using my anonymous email, I sent a vague tip to his firm's compliance officer, hinting at unusual client transactions tied to his shell company. I didn't name Clara, but I included enough detail, the cafe, dates from their meetings, to make him sweat. I wanted him distracted, paranoid, his charm fraying under scrutiny. Marla reported back a week later. Evan had been called into a meeting, his demeanor tense, his phone calls to Clara more frequent. Good. A stressed man makes mistakes. Clara felt it too, though she hid it. Her shop hours grew erratic, her excuses thinner. Supplier issues, she'd say, but her phone buzzed constantly, and she'd step outside to answer. I listened to the shop recorder, catching snippets of her worry. "What if they dig deeper?" she asked Evan once, her voice tight. His reply was smooth, dismissive. "They won't. I've handled worse." But I heard doubt in his pause, a crack in his control. Their foundation was shifting, and I hadn't even struck yet. I turned to Laura next, not directly but through observation. I attended another of her open houses, this time striking up a conversation, posing as a curious buyer. She was gracious, but her hands fidgeted, and she mentioned Evan unprompted. "He's always working late these days." I nodded, planting a seed. "Must be tough, with someone so busy." "My wife's the same, always at her shop." Laura's smile faltered, just for a moment, and I knew she sensed something, even if she couldn't name it. I left her my fake name and a card, ensuring she'd remember me if the time came. At home, I pushed Clara gently, testing her nerves. I mentioned the community center project, how it might bring media attention, maybe even spotlight local businesses like hers. "Could be big for you," I said, watching her reaction. She paled slightly, murmuring about being too busy for publicity. I pressed, casual but pointed. "You've been so secretive lately. Got a big client you're hiding." Her laugh was forced, her eyes darting to her phone. She was crumbling, not visibly but structurally, her lies bearing too much load. I refined my plan, sketching a dual collapse. For Evan, I'd amplify the compliance tip, maybe leak invoices to a journalist, framing him as a fraud who used clients, like Clara, for personal gain. For Clara, I envisioned her shop as the stage. A public event, billed as a celebration, where her financial ties to Evan would surface, not as an affair but as a scandal, her reputation wilting like neglected blooms. It was cruel, yes, but it matched their cruelty, her dismissal of me, his exploitation of her need. I wanted them exposed, not just to us but to their worlds, their lies the rubble of their downfall. That night, Clara reached for me, her touch hesitant, as if seeking reassurance. I held her, my arms a lie of their own, my mind elsewhere. I was no longer the man she'd married, nor the one she'd betrayed. I was something new, forged in the heat of her choices, my revenge a structure rising from the wreckage. The recorders hummed, Marla's reports stacked up, and I waited, knowing their next move would reveal the final piece I needed to bring their house down. Every structure has a breaking point, a moment when stress exceeds strength. I was nearing mine, and so were Clara and Evan, though they didn't know it. The compliance tip had rattled Evan. Marla reported he'd hired a lawyer, his meetings with Clara now terse, less romantic. Clara was fraying too, her smiles brittle, her excuses rushed. I'd applied just enough pressure to shake their confidence, but not enough to tip my hand. Now I needed to escalate, to force their lies to buckle before I revealed my design. I started with a bolder move. Using the anonymous email, I sent Laura a single photo. Clara and Evan at the Gilded Brew, their hands touching, time-stamped clearly. No message, just the image, enough to ignite her suspicion without exposing me. I didn't know how she'd react, but I wanted her as an unpredictable force, a tremor in their foundation. Marla confirmed Laura's response 2 days later. She'd confronted Evan, their argument loud enough to leak to neighbors. He denied everything, of course, but Laura wasn't buying it. She'd started checking his accounts, his schedule. Perfect. Clara sensed the ripple. The shop recorder caught her on a call with Evan, her voice sharp. "You said she'd never find out." His reply was curt. "She doesn't know anything solid. Stay calm." But Clara wasn't calm. She mentioned canceling their next trip, her trust in him fraying. I smiled, listening in my car, the darkness a cocoon for my plans. Their alliance was cracking. Their shared lies no longer enough to hold them together. I pushed further, leaking a second tip to the business journal, this time naming the shell company and suggesting personal misuse of funds. I wanted Evan's career teetering, his focus split. At home, Clara was a ghost of herself, her eyes shadowed, her laughter gone. She tried to bridge the gap, cooking my favorite meal one night, her hands trembling as she set the table. "We're okay, right?" she asked, her voice small. I wanted to scream. "Okay? You've rebuilt your life without me." But I nodded, my face a mask. "We're fine," I said, the lie bitter but necessary. I needed her vulnerable, not defensive, when the final blow came. I finalized my design, a two-pronged collapse. For Evan, the journal leak would escalate, with Marla planting documents where regulators could find them, enough to trigger an audit, maybe worse. For Clara, I planned a surprise at her shop. A stage delivery during a busy day, invoices and photos tucked among flowers, addressed to her customers, her community. It wouldn't just expose her. It would dismantle her sanctuary, petal by petal. Cruel? Undoubtedly. But so was her dismissal of our life, her choice to weave Evan into its fabric. I tested the plan's edges, meeting Marla one last time. She handed me a final report. Evan was liquidating assets, possibly preparing to run. Clara had withdrawn cash, maybe for the same reason. They were scared, their structure failing under pressures they couldn't trace. "You've got enough," Marla said. "What's your endgame?" I didn't answer fully, just thanked her, paid her, and left. My endgame wasn't destruction for its own sake. It was reclamation, a way to rebuild myself from their ruins. That night, Clara didn't sleep. I heard her pacing, her phone buzzing unanswered. I lay still, my architect's mind calm, my plan complete. The breaking point was here not just for them, but for me. I'd been Daniel Harper, husband, builder, fool. Now I was something else, a man ready to topple their world with the precision of a demolition expert. Tomorrow, I'd set the charges, and their lies would collapse, leaving only truth and me, standing in the debris. Timing is an architect's final stroke, the moment a design becomes reality. I'd spent weeks building my case, stacking evidence like bricks, but now I held the detonator. Clara and Evan were unraveling. Her shop visits dwindled, his office hours erratic, their confidence eroded by my unseen pressures. Laura's confrontation had shaken them. The journal tip had tightened the noose, and their own doubts were doing the rest. But I wasn't done. Revenge needed precision, a collapse that left no room for them to rebuild. I finalized the plan's details, my office a war room of notes and photos. For Evan, the business journal would receive a curated package. Invoices, shell company records, and a timeline of his meetings with Clara, framed as financial misconduct. It wouldn't just tarnish him. It would invite scrutiny he couldn't charm away. For Clara, I designed a public unraveling at Petal and Thorn. A delivery disguised as a client order, arriving during her busiest hour, containing copies of her invoices, photos of her with Evan, and a letter detailing their deception, addressed to her community. It was ruthless, yes, but it mirrored the ruthlessness of her lies. I tested the waters one last time, pushing Clara's nerves. Over dinner, I mentioned a colleague's wife who'd strayed. Watching her reaction. "That's awful," she said, her fork pausing, her eyes avoiding mine. "People make mistakes." I added, my tone neutral. She nodded too quickly and changed the subject. Her guilt was palpable, a crack I'd widen soon. Evan was harder to gauge, but Marla's updates showed him scrambling. Canceling client meetings, arguing with Laura daily. Their structure was buckling, and I was ready to pull the pin. I contacted a courier service, arranging the shop delivery for Friday, Clara's peak day. The package would look innocent. Floral wrapping, a bow, but its contents would bloom like poison. I also emailed the journal, scheduling the leak to hit the same day, ensuring Evan's world tilted simultaneously. Coordination was key. I wanted them to feel the ground shift at once, no chance to brace. I didn't sleep that night, my mind tracing every angle, every variable. Clara stirred beside me, her breath uneven, as if she sensed the storm. Laura was my wild card. I sent her another anonymous photo. Clara and Evan in Seattle, their ease unmistakable, hoping she'd act unpredictably, maybe confront Clara directly. I didn't need her alliance, just her chaos. Marla confirmed Laura was digging, hiring her own investigator. Good. Let their worlds collide. I was no longer just Daniel, the betrayed. I was the orchestrator, my revenge a symphony of their own making, each note a consequence they'd earned. Thursday, I visited Petal and Thorn, bringing Clara coffee. My last act as the husband she knew. She smiled, tired but genuine, and for a moment, I faltered, seeing the woman I'd loved. But the recorder's hum reminded me. She'd chosen Evan, chosen lies. I left, my heart heavy but my resolve steel. Tomorrow, their facades would shatter, and I'd watch from the shadows, an architect whose design was destruction, not creation. The detonator was primed, and I was ready to press. Friday dawned crisp, the air sharp with autumn's bite. I went to work, my drafting table a pretense, my mind on the courier and the journal. At 10 a.m., Marla texted. The package was en route to Petal and Thorn. The journal tip live online. A headline already brewing. Local advisor faces financial probe. Evan's collapse was underway, his reputation fracturing before he could spin it. I imagined him in his glass office, phone ringing, his charm useless against numbers and dates. But Clara's moment was my focus, the shop her stage. The courier arrived at noon as planned. I wasn't there, too risky, but Marla watched from across the street, her updates precise. Clara was behind the counter, busy with customers. When the delivery came, wrapped in her own shop's paper, marked urgent. Open immediately. She hesitated, Marla said, sensing something off, but curiosity won. She sliced it open, her hands steady until they weren't. The contents spilled out. Photos, invoices, the letter, all in plain view. Customers froze, Lily gasped, and Clara's face drained of color. Her sanctuary now a spotlight. The letter was my voice, though unsigned. Clara Harper has woven lies into Petal and Thorn, funneling funds to Evan Harrington under false pretenses. These documents show her betrayal not just of trust, but of this community. Photos of her with Evan, laughing, touching, were clipped to invoices, their dates aligned with shop records. Marla said Clara tried to gather them, her hands shaking, but customers were already whispering, some snapping pictures. Lily, loyal but stunned, asked, "Is this true?" Clara didn't answer, her world crumbling petal by petal. Across town, Evan's phone would be buzzing. Clients pulling accounts, Laura demanding answers, regulators circling. The journal's article was sparse but damning, quoting anonymous sources and listing transactions I'd fed them. I'd ensured Clara's name stayed out, for now, letting Evan take the first hit. But her shop was the epicenter, the delivery a tremor that would ripple outward. I checked my phone, seeing social media stir, posts about Petal and Thorn vague but curious. Clara's reputation, her pride, was wilting in real time. I stayed at my office, feigning focus, though my heart raced. Marla's final text came at 2 p.m. Clara had closed the shop early, sending Lily home, locking herself inside. I pictured her alone, surrounded by flowers, her lies exposed like roots torn from soil. I felt no joy, only a cold satisfaction, the kind that comes from a plan executed flawlessly. Evan's collapse was financial, Clara's emotional, but both were structural, their foundations gone. I'd stripped their supports, and gravity was doing the rest. At home, Clara wasn't there. I waited, knowing she'd return eventually, her mask shattered. I didn't call, didn't text. Let her feel the weight the way I had for months. My revenge wasn't complete. Not yet. But the first beams had fallen, and the sound was deafening. I poured a drink, sat in our quiet living room, and let the day's work settle, an architect surveying a site newly cleared, ready for what came next. Clara came home at 9 p.m., her face a map of exhaustion, her scarf loose, her hands empty of the shop keys she always carried. She didn't speak, just stood in the doorway, eyes searching mine for something. Anger? Accusation? Maybe forgiveness. I gave her nothing, my expression a blank blueprint, my heart a locked room. Rough day? I asked, my voice calm, cruel in its neutrality. She flinched, as if I'd struck her, and nodded, disappearing upstairs. The silence was louder than any fight. I checked online, the journal's article now viral in Portland's small business circles. Evan's name trending, his firm issuing a bland denial. Petal and Thorn had posts too. Customers confused, some supportive, others cutting. thought she was honest. What's with the photos? Clara's sanctuary was a public stage now. Her betrayal not just mine but everyone's. I'd planned that, knowing her shop was her soul. Its exposure a wound deeper than any confession. Evan's ruin was colder, his wealth and status slipping through his fingers like sand. Laura's role unfolded too. Marla reported she'd left their house, taking the kids, her investigator digging parallel to mine. The second photo I'd sent had pushed her over, confirming what she'd feared. I didn't pity her. She was collateral, not my focus. But her chaos amplified Evan's fall, his personal and professional lives now a tangled wreck. I wondered if Clara knew, if she'd tried calling him, only to find his number blocked or unanswered. Their affair, once a shared escape, was now a trap they'd sprung themselves. I followed Clara upstairs later, finding her in our bedroom, staring at her phone, its screen dark. "We need to talk," she said, her voice brittle, the first crack in her facade. I sat, letting her lead, curious what she'd admit. "The shop, something happened today," she began haltingly. "A delivery, papers, pictures." She looked at me, testing. "Someone's trying to ruin me." I tilted my head, feigning surprise. "Ruin you? Why?" She faltered, tears welling, but no confession came. She wasn't ready to face me, not fully. I didn't push. My revenge wasn't about her admitting guilt. It was about her living with its consequences. The shop's closure, the whispers, the invoices. She'd carry those like I'd carried her lies. Evan's ruin was a bonus, his empire crumbling under audits and distrust, his charm useless against facts. I'd orchestrated both, but Clara's silence now was my true reward. Proof her world had shifted, its axis no longer hers to control. I stood, leaving her to her thoughts, my architect's mind already drafting the next phase. That night, I slept in the guest room, not out of anger but clarity. Clara wasn't my anchor anymore. She was a stranger, her betrayal a blueprint I'd dismantled. The house felt different, its walls no longer ours but mine, a space I'd reclaim. I checked the recorders one last time. Nothing new, their voices stilled by their own collapse. My design was nearly complete, but one piece remained, ensuring they couldn't rebuild, not together, not separately. I wasn't done shaping their consequences, and the silence of this aftermath was just the pause before my final stroke. Clara broke the next morning, her confession spilling like a dam bursting. Over coffee, her hands trembling, she told me about Evan. Not everything, but enough. "It started a year ago," she said, eyes on the table. "He was different, exciting. I didn't mean to hurt you." Her voice cracked, but I felt no warmth, only a cold curiosity. "Why tell me now?" I asked, knowing the answer. The shop's exposure, the photos, had cornered her, her lies no longer a shield. "I can't keep pretending," she whispered. I listened, my face a mask, as she described stolen moments, trips, the thrill of secrecy. She didn't mention the money, the invoices, but I didn't need her to. I had those. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled back, not harshly but firmly. "Sorry doesn't rebuild trust," I said, my first honest words in weeks. She nodded, tears falling, but I saw no regret for Evan, only for being caught. That was her truth, and it fueled my resolve. I didn't reveal my role, not yet. Instead, I let her confession hang, a weight she'd carry alone. I left for work, checking updates on Evan. The Journal's article had sparked a formal investigation. His clients fleeing, his firm in chaos. Laura had filed for divorce, Marla said, her investigator uncovering more than mine. Other women, other scams. Evan was a house of cards, and I'd blown it down with a single breath. My anonymous tips the wind that toppled him. Clara stayed home, avoiding the shop, her phone silent. I'd heard Lily quit, unwilling to face the gossip, leaving petal and thorn a ghost of itself. I drove by, seeing the closed sign, its permanence a testament to my design. Customers had posted reviews, some scathing, others pitying, but all eroded Clara's foundation. I'd planned that too, knowing her identity was tied to her work, its loss a punishment sharper than any argument. She'd betrayed me, yes, but also herself, and I'd ensured she felt both. I met Marla one last time, tying loose ends. "You've done enough damage," she said, not judging but observing. "They're finished." I nodded, paying her final invoice, my ledger balanced. Evan's ruin was public, Clara's private but deeper, her shop and spirit broken. My revenge was architectural, methodical, proportional, complete. But I wasn't untouched. Clara's confession had stirred memories. Our early years, her laugh, our dreams. I'd destroyed her world, but part of me mourned the one we'd shared. Back home, I packed a bag, not leaving but preparing. Clara was in the garden, staring at her roses, their blooms fading. "What now?" she asked, sensing my distance. I didn't answer fully, just said, "We'll see." My revenge was done, its frame set, but the aftermath was mine to navigate. I'd reclaimed my agency, my worth, but the cost was a marriage reduced to rubble. I was ready to step away, not in anger but clarity, my next design my own. Months passed, the dust of my revenge settled, a landscape altered forever. Clara moved out, renting a small apartment, her shop sold to cover debts from the invoices fallout. She tried rebuilding, taking freelance floral jobs, but Portland's memory was long. Her name whispered in past tense. She wrote me once, a letter, not asking forgiveness but acknowledging her choices. "I lost myself," she said. I didn't reply. Her words were hers to carry, not mine to absolve. Evan's fall was swifter, his firm bankrupt, his license revoked after audits confirmed fraud. Laura's divorce left him with nothing, his kids distant, his charm irrelevant. Marla heard he'd moved to Seattle, chasing new schemes, but his shadow was smaller now, a man diminished. I didn't follow him, he was a footnote, his role in my story done. Laura thrived, her real estate business soaring, her strength a quiet victory I admired from afar. I stayed in our house, its walls mine now, though I redesigned it, new paint, new furniture, Clara's traces erased. My community center project won awards, my name in papers, a counterpoint to their scandals. I didn't gloat. I built, my architect's heart finding solace in creation. Friends asked if I'd forgive Clara, move on. I didn't answer fully. Forgiveness wasn't the point. Understanding was. She'd sought escape, I'd sought truth, and we'd both paid prices. My revenge lingered, not as regret but as a lesson. I'd been precise, cruel, effective, dismantling their worlds with the care I'd once put into buildings. It hadn't healed me, but it had freed me, clearing space for something new. I started sketching again, not just structures but ideas, travel, maybe, or teaching, sharing what I'd learned about resilience, betrayal, consequence. The recorders were gone, my evidence shredded, my plan complete. One evening, I walked the garden, Clara's roses pruned, their thorns less sharp. I thought of her, not with anger but distance, a blueprint I'd studied and set aside. I was Daniel Harper, architect, survivor, no longer defined by her choices or my vengeance. The new foundation was mine alone, solid, untested, ready for whatever I'd build next. I looked at the stars, their patterns eternal, and felt, for the first time in years, like a man who could dream again.